Hi, Dawn Anderson-Butcher here from LiFEsports at The Ohio State University. As part of our Coach Beyond work with the Ohio High School Athletic Association, we're going to do a brief module on banquets, how to host a successful end-of-the-season banquet. I'm joined today by three people here from Ohio. From Princeton City Schools outside Cincinnati, I have Joe Roberts, the athletic director there, as well as Landon Zellars. He's the head cheerleading coach. And then from Central Ohio, Nate Maust, boys soccer coach at Dublin Jerome High School, will also be with us. Can't wait to hear from them. Our game plan for this particular session around banquets is to do three things. Hopefully, by the end, you'll understand the value of banquets for the team, student athletes, and the broader community. Second, identify and examine the key components of a banquet, just the nuts and bolts. And then third, examine the coach's role in hosting a great end-of-the-season banquet. Let's first talk about reasons for a banquet. Foremost, we want to highlight commitment, effort, and achievements of your student athletes and your team. The interesting thing about sport, especially interscholastic sports, is that most every team loses at the end of the season. They get to the end of the season, they make it to the tournament, and they're knocked out. So the banquets become that final culminating event that acknowledges not just what student athletes have done over the season, but maybe over the course of that year or even their entire career as a student athlete in your program. The second reason is to continue to build and foster a sense of community within your program and team. You want to engage your athletes, your families, community partners, statisticians, anyone that's involved to continue to foster that sense of belonging, right? That helps people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And then lastly, the third reason for banquets is probably the most obvious, but to recognize the contributions of your student athletes, both as performers, right, in terms of stats and win-losses, but also into their commitment and effort and motivation over time. So let's talk about components of a good banquet. Foremost, we got to have a party. Let's celebrate. So your banquet should create a space where you're really cherishing and fostering a lot of fun around the team and the players. Go all out, especially given the resources that you have. Think about food, decorations, parent-caregiver involvement, maybe even senior gifts. Again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to celebrate big. So my colleague, Nick Hajar, who's the AD and football coach at North Union here outside of Columbus, he actually has his banquet on Sunday afternoons at 1 o'clock. Again, families are just getting up or getting their day started at the end of the weekend or coming home from church. The coaches get really dressed up. The student athletes are wearing khakis and polos. Each of the families brings a dessert or an appetizer. Most of the time is spent networking, communicating, socializing as a family and eating. And then they have a short banquet program at the end where they acknowledge all the athletes. Again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You don't have to have a $30 per person meal. As a coach, you also want to think about how you're not boring, right? So try to keep the length of your banquet short. Keep it moving, keep the pace going, and then be sure to create a really welcoming environment. Let's hear Coach Landon talk about how he makes banquets fun and engaging.
At the end of the season, I go all out to celebrate my athletes and my parents and my coaches because throughout the year, they put in so much hard work that a lot of people don't get to see. We typically see cheerleaders just during the 4 quarters of the game, and my athletes and my coaches spend long hours of practicing for competition, practicing for sideline. My athletes as well train strength and conditioning outside of practice with our strength and conditioning coordinator at the school. They participate in study tables and fundraisers. And the thing about cheerleaders that most don't know is every event that you see that the school hosts, 9 times out of 10, they ask the cheerleaders to be there, especially in the eye of the public. So I choose to spend time for my banquets celebrating them with feeding them a full course meal that they can endeavor in and gifts and just showing them that they're valued and, their worth and that their hard work doesn't go in vain. And especially with my parents, I do the same for them. That's why I invite families and we feed families and we gift families. In the past, I have gifted gift cards or plaques to parents and things of that nature. And my seniors, I feel like at the end of the season, this is it for you. This is your last thing that you have as a Princeton cheerleader. So we shower them not only with gifts from ourselves, but the program.
Next purpose, right, of a good banquet is to foster a sense of community, to continue to strengthen the sense of belonging that the players, the families, and all the people that are involved in your program feel, right? This is time for players and families to socialize, connect, talk, network. Another way to engage and create a sense of community is to involve the community in planning. Parents and caregivers can help plan the banquet, whether that be decorations, food, invitations. I'm actually creating pictures of all the players and the athletes so that they have a gift to go home with. Players also can organize coach gifts like a highlight reel or out-of-the-box awards. I've seen teams give out things like the best dressed off the field award or most dedicated parent award. Another way you can acknowledge your team and your athletes is by having stats, right? And it might not be just the stats from this program. You might create the stats for the entire program and leave a worksheet or handout on every table for people to look at beforehand. Again, creating the sense of community and legacy around what it means to be on your team or as part of your program. Lastly, think about ways you can emphasize traditions within your program and the school. One of the best traditions I've seen is out of Wheelersburg. Rob Woodward, who's the AD there, talks about how in conjunction with their banquet, they have a big bonfire. And at the bonfire, they burn up all their programs and their stats and different artifacts from the football team for that season in order to sort of signify the end of this season and the move into the off season. Again, lots of different ways you can create sense of community and belonging. Let's hear a little bit now from Joe about different ways they think about creating a sense of belonging and having great banquets at Princeton.
The key to a successful end of the season award program really comes down to communication. It comes down to communication from our parents, it comes down to communication from our coaches, back to our student athletes, back to our community, back to those that have been involved in our program, making sure that they know the time, the place, what the program's going to look like, if you will. And that will build the success. The more you communicate it, the more they know, the better off you're going to be as a leader and as a coach moving into closing out your season. And then from there, it really is about highlighting the successes of our student athletes. You can highlight the successes of our coaching staffs as well, but it really does come down to the time of highlighting our student athletes. And whether you've had a successful season or not a successful season, you need to capture that moment and celebrate the season as a whole. If a coach isn't going to speak about all of the student athletes, then I highly recommend they don't speak about any of the student athletes, that they talk about their team from beginning to end and keep the focus on the team. You can run into all kinds of scenarios. You can take a football team that didn't win a single football game all year, but there was probably some great accomplishments that may have happened from that. So you want to highlight that and you want to focus on that. Yes, you want to talk about the points of growth and the down moments, but you want to really continue to stay on that point about the team and what they gave all year. If you're going to talk about all of your student athletes, you need to share some stories, share some commonalities about them. Maybe you have a funny story about each and every one of the student athletes, but try to keep that moment, because those student athletes, whether they saw the playing field or they didn't, they committed time, they committed energy, they committed their finances to be a part of this program because they wanted to be. That's why they're still there. That's why they are student athletes.
I enjoyed hearing Joe especially talk about communication, right? And communication also is really important for this particular topic here, being purposeful, right? How at the banquet are you going to intentionally recognize the hard work that every student athlete, family member, and coach have put into the season? Now, this can be pretty obvious, right? It can be verbally with your speeches, phrases, words, highlight reels, or it can be through physical artifacts like gifts and awards. Now, you can have traditional kinds of gifts, right, where you're giving out participation awards or most valuable player. I've also seen other kinds of awards like most improved or the coaches award or the best teammate award or the best leader award. What kind of message do you want to emphasize of your athletes' contributions, both in their performance, on the field, on the court, but also off the field in these other roles that are important to play? You might also give awards or be intentional about how you recognize the efforts of others. This could be parents and caregivers, team managers, statisticians. I'm looking here at this picture now. Coach Butcher, who's with Dublin Jerome Celtic Golf, he actually has a Celtic Rock Award that he gives out every year, not to a student athlete on the team, not to a coach, not to a parent, but to somebody else who actually goes above and beyond and gives back to their program. Again, how are you going to be intentional? How are you going to make sure that you contribute and recognize each person, each family and coach so that they feel like they're an important part of your team? Let's hear now from Coach Maust about how he does this in his banquets.
One of the biggest keys to a successful end-of-season banquet or a memorable one is what you do at the start of the season. The beginning of the season is the perfect time to really make connections and build rapport with the players. Your conversations and what you do before practices, like, kind of build into the season. And then obviously there's certain things along the season that we do, whether it's team building activities or dinners or stuff like that. Making memories with the players is going to lead to a much easier banquet at the end, because you have stories to tell, you have connections, you have a lot of different things throughout the season that were positive or the kids will remember, and then you can bring those up at the banquet. So for us, I know we've had a lot of fun banquets because we've had a lot of fun in the season with our players, and it's a lot easier to talk about kids when you have tight connections and good memories with them. For instance, our JV team, that coach, instead of telling what the name of the player was, he would just say some specific things about the player and see if everybody could guess who the player was. So, he'd talk about, whether this player was an on-time person, maybe a funny story about the player, or where they played and kind of what some of their stats were, or, funny things about them. And then the rest of the team would try to guess who it was.
It's been fun over time seeing Nate in his programming of his banquets. Some of what we have here I've actually stolen from his program, but this is an example banquet layout. What this does, again, for you as a coach, get you starting to think about your agenda, right? What are you going to do when guests arrive, right? How are you going to make it so they feel welcome and part of the program right away and excited to celebrate? Opening remarks, again, keep it short, keep it simple. You're going to engage speakers from your team? Are you going to have a highlight reel? And then how will you, again, keep those awards and presentations really short and simple, but make sure everyone feels acknowledged and like they belong in your program? Senior recognitions. Sometimes folks do this at a different event, maybe like a senior night that's in conjunction with a game, but you might do it here too. But again, think about how you're going to send off those seniors onto their journey. Family and coach recognitions, always a good idea. And then some closing remarks. Remember, keep it short. Last, we also have a checklist here about how you might think about banquet planning ahead of time. Foremost, meet with your coaches, meet with some parents and caregivers, maybe your boosters and captains, to plan the agenda. Think about your logistics. What's the location? What's the time? What do you want to have as your overall vision? Delegate key roles. Who's getting the food? What are the awards? How about decorations? Thinking about that highlight reel or that stat sheet. How can others support you in making it great? If you're going to have speeches of people that are involved in the banquet, make sure you think about their length, maybe even practice with them and check the message. Make sure it's on point. Communicate, right, with their athletes and families, the agenda and the date of the banquet ahead of time. Let's make sure people can move around their schedules so they can come be there and feel connected. Determine specifically how athletes will be acknowledged. Prepare some great stories, maybe some stats, some strengths to share with the audience. Perhaps you want to think about highlighting a group of athletes. Maybe it's the 8th graders and as they move into high school, or your O-line. Maybe it's the sophomores who are moving up onto varsity next year and have really big shoes to fill. Write down your talking points, right? So you don't forget them, but also so that you're on point and don't ramble. Last, a couple other details to think about in relationship to logistics. Check in with your AD, make sure everyone has an acknowledgement and award, right? Print the awards ahead of time, check for spelling, and then don't forget to check in with the venue to make sure all your technology works. All right, well, so this was short and simple. I hope this was helpful in reminding you of the reasons we have banquets, right? And what are some components of really successful ones. Remember, have fun, celebrate, create that sense of belonging and connection so everyone feels like they're part of the program. And last, how are you purposefully and intentionally going to make sure you acknowledge everybody that's contributed and continue to push forth better effort and contributes over time? And then lastly, we gave you a couple of checklists on what you as a coach can do to make sure you have a great end of the season banquet. Hopefully you got one or two new ideas or reinforced some of your old ones so that you can put together the best of the best. Thanks for watching.